what's up you guys? My name is Amy and welcome back to my YouTube channel. On this channel we talk about all things different true crime, from jewelry heists, bank heists, and infamous mobsters. To kick off this channel, I thought it would be good to start out with the probably most infamous mobster that we all know of, Mr. Al Capone. Also known as Scarface, public enemy number one, you name it, I'm sure you've probably heard of him. Okay, so Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born on January 17th of 1988 to his parents, Gabriel and Teresa Capone, who were Italian immigrants. His father Gabriel was a barber, while his mother Teresa was a seamstress. He had 8 siblings, 2 of which were brothers who also participated in the crime community. Before his prime crime time, didn't mean that to rhyme, he was in some small-time gangs in New York City, including the Junior 40 Thieves, the Bowery Boys, and the Brooklyn Rippers. He was also in the 5 Points Gang. 5 Points Gang is a little more known than the other 3. The 5 Points Gang kind of ran in Lower Manhattan, which is now known as Chinatown. They were known for their brutality, and they were also known to fight till the death. At this time that he was in the smaller gangs, he was employed by his future mentor, Frankie Yale, who again is another infamous crime boss. He was a bartender at the Harvard Inn on which is also known as the Coney Island Saloon. As I mentioned, he had various nicknames. I mean, every mobster kind of has their own name. Al's was Scarface. The reason behind the name Scarface is because while he was younger, working as a bouncer in Brooklyn, he insulted a woman, obviously not great, and the woman's brother, who was actually Frank Galluccio, who was another famous mobster, actually attacked him and slashed his face 3 times. There's not a lot of pictures of the slashing, like of the scars on his face, because he didn't want the media to see it. Like, he would always want like the other side of his face photographed, probably because he didn't want people to think that he was any lesser of a mobster because he had scars on his face. I don't know. In December of 1918, he got married. He was only 19. He got married to a woman named May, partially due to the fact that earlier that month, so early December of 1918, they gave birth to their first son, Albert Francis Capone, who is also known as Sonny. Since they were both under 21, each of their parents, May's and Al's parents, had to give written consent for them to get married. So Al is still doing all his criminal activity, and his former 5 Points Gang mentor, Johnny Torrio, actually recruited him to go to Chicago. At this time, there was a lot of bootlegging going on due to the prohibition laws that were just passed. Bootlegging is also known as rum running. It's the illegal business of smuggling alcoholic beverages to A, avoid taxation of the beverages, and B, avoid the prohibition laws. I'm sure you guys know, at least have like a rough understanding about prohibition, but I'm just going to touch on it now. Prohibition, it was passed on January 17th, 1920. Now, if January 17th sounds familiar to you, that was actually his birthday. I thought that was kind of funny that Prohibition was passed on January 17th, which was his birthday, just because of all the stuff that happens to him because he defied the Prohibition laws. Prohibition went from January 17th to 1920 to December 5th of 1933, so it was 13 years of a, quote, noble experiment. It was passed to, quote, reduce crime and corruption because they thought that alcohol was the problem. There's many like it's speculated of who wanted it passed. Some people think that it was the wives that wanted, like the women in the country that wanted it passed because like their husbands were getting violent towards them when they were drinking, which I guess is fair. It was prohibition laws was also the 18th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So back to when he moved to Chicago, he actually moved without his family, so without his wife and his son. In 1923 in Chicago, he purchased a house for $5,500. Must be nice. You can't even make a down payment for that much anymore. Like, yeah, whatever. In 1924, town council elections were held for the small town of Cicero, which is a suburb of Chicago. These town council elections were later to be noted as, quote, one of the most corrupted and crooked elections in Chicago history. Capone endorsed a candidate, just like how rich people nowadays will endorse politicians, so give them money and support them that way. So the candidate that Capone endorsed won and then turned on him. Frank Capone, as I mentioned earlier, Frank is one of Capone's brothers. He was in crime and he actually passed away at the polls. I don't know if he was protesting or what was going on, but he died over there. Obviously, being in this industry that he is, in the bootlegging industry, a lot of people want to have a monopoly, so they want to be the only ones just so they get all the money of like supply and demand. So it's basic like economics. So supply and demand, people want it and you have it, so you can up the price for what you have and people will buy it and monopolize on it. Just like the game Monopoly, you want to own everything, so everybody gives you money. So Al Capone and Johnny Torrio were trying to monopolize their own bootlegging business so they could have all the powers, so they could get all the money from everybody who was also participating in the bootlegging industry. So Johnny Torrio and Al Capone, they competed with another mobster called Dean O'Banion. O'Banion found out one of his breweries was going to be raided, obviously because breweries are brewing beer and beer is illegal because of the prohibition laws. So it was going to get raided by police. So O'Banion had the bright idea to say, hey, Johnny Torrio, do you want all my shares in this brewery? Like it's gonna go really well. So to take his ownership out of it so he wouldn't get in trouble, hopefully. That didn't end well for O'Banion. Actually, Johnny Torrio and O'Banion were arrested because of this raid of the brewery. So this bright idea of O'Banion's actually got him offed because Johnny Torrio's people didn't enjoy that their boss, that their leader was in jail, so they actually offed O'Banion because of his bright idea to sell his share of the brewery. So after Johnny Torrio got out of jail, he moved back to Italy, and then Al Capone acquired the whole bootlegging business, which was kind of his plan all along, which, I mean, cool. So this said business, they smuggled liquor from the East Coast in Canada into Chicago. They also got local moonshining distilleries to supply them with moonshine, local and then like non-local, like from other places in the Midwest. They were making buco bucks. They were making so much money. And because they're making so much money, they had a tight grip on politics and a tight grip on the Chicago Police Department. So there was something called the Capone's Castle, which was actually which was Chicago's Lexington Hotel. It served as kind of like a headquarters for Capone and his henchmen, I think is what they refer to them as. Capone paid off the mayor to support him and probably just get more protection. As I said, Capone and his boys were making buku bucks, especially Capone, so he definitely enjoyed the finer things in life. He had custom suits, custom cigars, he had lavish food and drink, jewelry, and female visitors, if you know what I mean, while still having a family of wife and son in New York City, mind you, don't forget that. On top of the bootlegging industry, he was operating casinos and speakeasies. So obviously casinos where they gamble, and speakeasies, kind of like bars, and prostitutes. Female visitors is what speakeasies have. Capone says, quote, "I am just a businessman giving the people what they want," end quote, and all I do is satisfy the public demand. So he's just running a business in his mind. He doesn't care that it is illegal. He doesn't care that he's probably going to get in trouble for it later. He's just running a basic business, and it's paying off very well for him at this point. So obviously with Capone running a lot of Chicago at this point, he does have a few enemies. That one of those enemies is a whole gang called the North Side Gang, which it would be very scary to have a whole gang go after you, but I bet Capone is used to it. So the North Side Gang shot into the Hawthorne Hotel where some of Capone's men, including Capone, they did this on September 20th of 1926. A motorcade of 10 vehicles, all equipped with the needed equipment to attack people, if you know what I mean. I can't say it on here, but you know what I mean. So a motorcade just totally obliterated like the storefront of the hotel, trying to get them. Many innocent bystanders were either offed or injured within this attack. Capone paid for medical bills of a young single mother and her son. I believe the mother was gonna go blind if she didn't get like a needed surgery, all because of what happened. And Capone was known for doing that. He was known for paying for any like collateral damage of people's lives. He was known for paying for funerals or for like medical expenses of somebody who got hurt in the crossfire. So after this attack, Capone called for a truce with the North Side Gang, but that actually fell through. So because, like I said earlier, Capone was getting a lot of money. He was raking in the dollars. So he bought a lot of property and used them as his hideouts. One of the most notable was in Wisconsin. He actually bought 407 acres, including a 37-acre lake, which is just crazy. His whole entourage would buy all the tickets for sleeper cars and spend weeks on weeks in various cities under aliases, probably committing a crazy amount of time, probably doing a lot of substances that we don't even know about, probably. Like, it's crazy probably what they did. He then bought a 10,000 square foot home in Palm Island, Florida. And right now I just want you to throw out a number of how much you think this 10,000 square foot home in Florida costs. Just do it, because it's gonna be less. He bought this 10,000 square foot home in Florida for $40,000. $40,000 for a 10,000 square foot home in Florida. You can't even use $40,000 as a down payment for a house right now. And homeboy bought a big old house for 40 grand. That's crazy. Like 40 grand is a car, like a very nice car, don't get me wrong, but 40 grand is a car, not a house anymore. Inflation is crazy. He actually bought this house from Clarence Bush of the Anheuser-Busch Company. I think that's the same company that has like Busch Light, like the beer. So most of you probably know roughly about the St. Valentine's Day event. I can't say the last word, but you probably know about it. At least in my history books in public high school, it was talked about. I don't know if it was with you, but in our curriculum it was. So in 1929, there was an event, a very deadly event that happened. The details are highly disputed, but it is thought that it was a retaliation against the Northside Gang. So the reason why they went after them is because the Northside Gang hijacked some of the outfits, so some of Capone's group's booze trucks. Some of Capone's men rented an apartment across the street from one of the Northside Gang's warehouses, which was thought to be headquarters for their boss, Bugs Moran. So they rented this warehouse, like this apartment, so they could see, like, obviously what they were doing, kind of spy on them, and also to see when they were about to roll out and carry on with this attack. So Capone's men, disguised as police, pulled them over, and obviously this is probably like an everyday occurrence for them. So Capone's men, disguised as police, pulled them over and offed them. Sure, I hope that's okay to say. And offed them. There were 7 victims. This whole event shocked the public because obviously they already knew about Capone and his men, but they didn't really know to what degree they were gonna go. Capone was summoned to testify because obviously it was his men that did it. So he was summoned to testify, and he claimed to be too unwell to testify in front of a Chicago grand jury. In an effort to clean up his image, Capone donated to various charities and also sponsored a soup kitchen. So like I said, like he does a lot of bad stuff, but then he turns around and I'll go over this later, but then he turns around and then does something nice after totally like instilling so much fear into people for doing this in their community. That's just whatever. So being Al Capone, obviously you would expect a lot of people not to like you, and obviously you would expect people to have hits out for your head, fitting it nicely. One of these people that put their whole heart and soul into wanting Capone off was Joe Elio. Joe Elio wanted to be head of the Sicilian Union, but he lost the race to Antonio Lombardo and thought that it was Capone's fault because Lombardo was endorsed by Capone. Elio was actually friends with Capone and Lombardo, but after this he completely cut ties with them and partnered up with some of Capone's enemies and went full force after Capone. There were several attempts made to off Capone by Elio. He got creative with it. He offered the chef of one of Capone's favorite cafes in New York, he offered him between $10,000 and $35,000 to put acid in Lombardo and Capone's soup. The chef, probably not wanting their men after him, exposed Elio's plan, which is probably a good idea, Mr. Chef. Capone exposed this plan, and Capone dispatched his men to destroy one of Elio's storefronts. In summer of 1927, multiple hitmen were offed trying to get to Capone. Elio then offered a $50,000 reward to whoever could off him first. At least 10 men tried, but all resulted in their own passing. Capone's ally, Ralph Sheldon, actually tried, but his henchman and later successor, Frank Nitti, caught wind of it and told Capone. So this next one is widely speculated through like between different historians and stuff. But allegedly, Elio tried to get 3 of Capone's men to overthrow Capone and take over the outfit. Historians believe this is somewhat half true. Others believe that this was only said to play into like his fearsome reputation. So in 1930, Capone apparently got tired of Elio coming for his neck and offed him himself, roughly, through his men. There was a failed plan to get him in Buffalo, New York, but then he came back to Chicago, so they canceled that plan. On October 23rd of 1930, Elio was leaving his apartment, and one of Capone's men was in a second-story window across the street from his apartment and wounded him 13 times with a thing. You know what I mean? I can't say it, but you know what I mean. Elio was able, even with the 13 GSWs, he was able to go around the corner only to be within range of a second man, who then ultimately stopped his life. So obviously by this time, I'm sure you're wondering, like, okay, somebody has to be doing something about Capone because he's like, there's so much happening. Like, it can't all be under wraps. People have to have half a brain to realize what's going on. So for a publisher of a newspaper in Chicago, Walter A. Strong, the February 14th event was the ultimate last straw. Walter asked his friend, who was actually Herbert Hoover, who was the president at the time, to try to put a stop to the city's, quote, lawlessness, because, as I said earlier, mobs are just, not even just Capone, like different mobsters, different gangs, they are all taking over Chicago, and it really was lawlessness, because what they say goes and what they say is the law. So in 1954, Herbert Hoover published a memoir, and this quote is from his memoir. So Strong was quoted saying, "Chicago was in the hands of gangsters, that the police and magistrates were under their control. The federal government was the only force by which the city's ability to govern itself would be restored. At once, I directed that all federal agencies concentrate upon Mr. Capone and his allies." So as I said, that was a quote directly from Herbert Hoover's memoir, who was said by Strong. So after Walter Strong reaching out to Herbert Hoover, a multi-agency attack on Capone ensued. The Treasury and Justice Department collaborated against all Chicago gangsters for income tax prosecutions. So they're not paying their taxes because obviously the way they're getting their money isn't legal. The Prohibition Bureau agents went after bootleggers, obviously because it's against the law, it's against Prohibition law. The writer for the Chicago Daily News named Charles Schwartz dubbed them as the Untouchables, really going after Capone, so he's getting tried a lot. So I'm gonna name off dates and like what his charges were. So March 29th, 1929, he was arrested by federal agents after leaving a courtroom after testifying at a trial investigating violations of prohibition laws. He was then charged with contempt of court for the St. Valentine's Day event, when he said that he was too ill to testify, so he was charged with contempt of court. On May 16th, 1929, him and a few of his men were arrested in Philadelphia for carrying a concealed weapon. The day after that, May 17th, 1929, he was indicted by a grand jury. He pled guilty and he was sentenced to prison for 1 year. On August 8th, 1929, he was then transferred to Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. So at Eastern State Penitentiary, he had a very lavish cell. I will include a few pictures on just how lavish it was. Sources differ on if he had a cellmate or not, but he didn't even serve his full sentence. I think it was like 7 months, because he got out in March of 1930, and a day after he was released, he got dubbed as Public Enemy Number 1. Another trial in 1930 in Miami, he was arrested on vagrancy charges. Vagrancy is the condition of homelessness without regular employment or income. The governor ordered sheriffs to, quote, run him out of town. Capone claimed that Miami police refused food and water and then threatened to arrest his family. He was then charged with perjury for making a statement in court. Perjury is the intentional act of a false oath. So like, you don't put your hand on the Bible, swear like that you'll tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. So he lied in court. Then he was acquitted after a 3-day trial in July. In 1930, there was a warrant issued for his arrest on the contempt of court charges, again for saying that he was too ill to testify after the St. Valentine's Day event. Contempt of court, if you don't know, it's the offense of being disobedient or disrespectful toward a court of law and its officers. So like not showing up, that's being disobedient. A lot of people, like obviously even now, they're charged with contempt of court. In February of 1931, he was tried on the charges of contempt of court and then charged to 6 months in prison. But then his legal team tried to appeal it to reinforce the fact that judges and lawyers needed to discuss with the doctor to kind of get proof that he was too sick, as Capone put it, too ill to participate. So one of the most common things that mobsters from this time get charged with is tax evasion. I wanted to kind of look a little bit more into what tax evasion really was because I didn't understand it. Obviously I knew that it was evading taxes. I'm not that stupid, but I just wanted to look more into it. It said, quote, illegally earned income was still subject to income tax. They wanted to focus on source of income rather than spending of income, especially in Al Capone's cases. After his brother Ralph was charged with evading taxes, Al wanted to avoid it because he thought, crap, this is gonna happen to me and I don't wanna do it. So he had his lawyer regularize his tax position. So I don't on 110% fully understand what like I can't even say it. Really? Regularize taxing means, but either way, his lawyer didn't do it. His lawyer made crucial admissions on taxes from 1928 to 1929. They said he only made $100,000. Now, I couldn't find if that was $100,000 each year for a total of $200,000 or $100,000 altogether from 28 and 29. On March 13th, 1931, he was charged with income tax evasion by a grand jury in Chicago. He was then indicted by a federal grand jury on 22 counts of income tax evasion. He then posted a $500,000 bond. So somebody paid $500,000 to get him out of jail. He was then indicted on 5,000 violations of the prohibition laws for obviously what he's doing in Chicago with the bootlegging stuff. On June 16th, 1931, he pled guilty on all charges and then offered a plea deal of 2.5 years. So I'm sure you guys know what a plea deal is, but just in case you don't, a plea deal is kind of saying, I will plead guilty as long as you give me 2.5 years and nothing more. But in July of 1930, a judge refused the plea deal, so they had to take it back and then had to go to a trial. On the second day of trial, they deemed a 1930 letter from Capone's attorney as evidence, but they then decided to overturn the charges of the prohibition laws because the tax evasion charges took precedence over those. So Capone's lawyers had little to no time to prepare, so they claimed that all of the unaccounted for income was lost gambling. So a lot of money lost gambling. That's great. Obviously he was charged. He sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, along with $50,000 in fines and $7,692 in court costs. He was then held liable for $215,000 plus interest on back taxes. So he still had to owe the country and the state the money that he didn't pay up, plus interest. So just pay your taxes. I know it's not very fun, but just do it, or else you're going to be owing a heck of a lot more than you owe now. At age 33, in May of 1932, he was shipped to the Atlanta, Georgia Penitentiary. This is where he was officially diagnosed with syphilis and gonorrhea, thought to be contracted when he worked as a bouncer in Brooklyn. Syphilis and gonorrhea are pretty severe STDs. In 1932, there wasn't really a cure or any treatment for it. At the Atlanta, Georgia Penitentiary, he was also experiencing withdrawals from cocaine and probably various other drugs that we just don't know about. He also had a job of stitching soles to the bottom of shoes for 8.5 hours a day. So very fun. Family and friends stated that he was starting to send incoherent letters, probably due to the fact that he had raging viruses going through his body. He bullied inmates who his cellmate feared, but his cellmate worried that he would have a breakdown, mostly because inmates didn't fully respond well to Capone. They thought he was weak without his men, like his personality. They thought he had a weak personality. Inmates also thought that he was receiving special treatment, even though there was no evidence. And then he was moved to Alcatraz in California in August of 1934. So he was moved to Alcatraz, California in August of 1934. Alcatraz is an island just off into the Bay of San Francisco, if you didn't know. He was stabbed by a fellow inmate on June 23rd of 1936. Not a lot has been said about what happened between 34 when he went in there and 36 when he was stabbed, but he did have good behavior. I don't know if this was before and after or just after he got stabbed, but he played the banjo in an inmate band that played on Sunday nights. This time is when he started to decline mentally. He was diagnosed with neurosyphilis in February of 1938. Neurosyphilis is an infection of the central nervous system. Symptoms include headache, stiff neck, paresthesia, which is loss of sensation, loss of bladder control, personality, and mood changes. So he was really going through it mentally. He spent the last year in Alcatraz in the hospital section, confused and disoriented because there's a virus that's totally ravaging in his brain. He completed his term on January 6th of 1939. He was then transferred to the Federal Correction Institution at Terminal Island in California to serve his time for the contempt of court charges. He was paroled on November 16th, 1939 after his wife, May, appealed based on his reduced mental capacity. So I don't know if you guys are thinking okay, yeah, Al Capone is now locked up. What's going on with the outfit back in Chicago? So former henchman, like I mentioned him earlier, Frank Nitti, took over as boss after he was released from prison in 1932. They were no longer, quote, troubled by the Chicago police, mostly because they were not as violent. But I think it's funny that they say, oh, troubled by the police, because the police are doing their job and you're the one that's troubling them. Anyway, organized crime had a lower profile after prohibition was appealed. They mostly made their money on labor union racketeering, gambling, and a P word that I can't say that involves selling your body. Labor union racketeering is actually the infiltration and or control of a union or employee benefit plan for personal benefit through illegal, violent, or fraudulent means. Most of these crimes are just trying to cheat the system, and it's really just biting them in the butt. It is speculated that Capone actually ordered a few offings from prison, one of those being the 1939 offing of Edward J. O'Hare. This was all from prison. So he was released from prison on November 16th, 1939. He was then referred to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, where he was refused treatment due to his violent and past reputation. He then went to Union Memorial Hospital, I believe that is also in Baltimore, and they were willing to treat him. And because of this, he donated two Japanese weeping cherry trees to the hospital. Now, these are going to be a lot of dates that I'm going to name off. So, March 20th, 1940, he permanently moved to his mansion in Palm Island, Florida. In 1942, he became one of the first American patients to receive the antibiotic penicillin for treatment of his syphilis. In 1946, his primary care provider, aka his doctor, concluded that he had the mental capacity of a 12-year-old. January 21st of 1947, he had a stroke and then was diagnosed with bronchopneumonia. On January 22nd and January 25th, he suffered from cardiac arrest and then ultimately passed away on January 25th, 1947 at age 48. His body was then transferred back to Chicago for a private funeral, and then he was originally buried at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Chicago. In 1950, Capone's remains, along with his father's and brother's remains, were all moved to Mount Carmel Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois. So, that's the story of Al Capone, roughly. Obviously, I didn't want to get into like the fully nitty-gritty of it because that's too long and a lot of research, and the mob scares me, so that's nice. So I wanted to look into kind of like the psychology around why us as a society is so interested and fascinated about like mobsters and Al Capone especially. And so I did some research on that. So Al Capone, for his time, was known as the respectable gangster. As I've mentioned multiple times before, he would pay for hospital bills of people that were caught in crossfire. He sponsored soup kitchens, and like I said, he donated those 2 trees to the hospital. I guess he wouldn't, like a lot of stuff, like it wouldn't be like 110% like on site. Like if he saw one of his enemies with his family, he wouldn't go after them, which nowadays it's 100% on site. Like if I see you, I don't care who you're with, like you're still gonna get offed. A lot of it also is nostalgia. Like he died, I mean, it was 80 years ago, which seems like a long time ago, but in all reality, it's not. Like our grandparents or our great-grandparents probably have a different point of view about what it was like living back then, especially with him alive. So we can hear a different standpoint about it from them. Another thing is Hollywood. Mobsters, especially Al Capone, are characters in Hollywood. you have like The Godfather, and then you have other movies and TV shows as well. They also cover a lot of other mobsters as well. So Mario Games, the owner of a virtual Al Capone museum, stated, "It is bad to look up to any criminal, but I think it's important to differentiate between, say, Adolf Hitler or Jeffrey Dahmer and Al Capone." Obviously, Adolf Hitler did the whole Holocaust, totally, that's a whole other thing. And Jeffrey Dahmer also brutally and heinously killed people. And obviously Al Capone did as well, but I think everybody would agree it's on a different level. You can't deny the fact that he did what he did. And you shouldn't totally glorify him either. You shouldn't glorify anybody. You should have better idols than that. That is it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any video suggestions, don't forget to leave them down below. Also, like and subscribe. That will help me out a lot. If you have any suggestions on what I could do, I don't know. I mean, I don't think the audio is great. I'll get working on that. And then I think the setup is okay. It's not bad. But if you have any suggestions or comments, leave them down below. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you.